Picture a rock band, and you probably picture chaos. Smashed hotel rooms, fortunes blown overnight, contracts scrawled on a napkin at 3 in the morning. Now picture the opposite, a blue-chip multinational. Holding companies, tax lawyers, a corporate structure engineered to the decimal point. What if those two pictures were the same organization? For more than 60 years, the Rolling Stones have quietly run one of the most disciplined money machines in all of entertainment. And the wild part is where it began. Not with a hit record, but with them losing almost everything. Go back to the 1960s. 5 young Londoners sign a record deal, the standard deal of the era, and the standard deal was a trap. The label puts up the money, controls the recordings, and quietly keeps the copyrights. So the songs that turned these kids into global stars? On paper, the band didn't own them. Their early manager gathered up the master tapes and the song publishing, the two assets that pay an artist forever, and walked off with the rights to their entire first decade of work. Think of it in 2 pieces. The master is the actual recording, the exact take you hear. The publishing is the song itself, the melody and the words. Own both, and every play anywhere on earth sends money your way. Own neither, and you're just the hired voice. Even now, half a century later, the band earns almost nothing from the very records that made their name. It was a brutal lesson and an expensive one. But one member had a secret weapon that had nothing to do with music. Before the band, their singer had won a place at the London School of Economics. He'd dropped out to chase a sound, but he never stopped thinking like an economist. And after being fleeced once, he was finished being someone else's asset. So, in the early 1970s, they did something almost no artist dared to do. They hired a banker, not a flashier manager, an actual financier. An aristocrat who happily admitted he barely knew their songs. His job was not to book concerts, it was to look at the band the way an analyst looks at a company. And what he found was a business built upside down. The cash flowed to the label, to the promoters, to a dozen middlemen, and only a thin trickle ever reached the people whose name was on the ticket. His prescription was radical. Stop being the product that other companies sell. Become the company. He started with the concerts. For years, a tour was just something a band endured to promote an album. A money-losing road trip with a light show attached. So they turned it inside out. The tour wasn't the advertisement for the product. The tour was the product. They designed and built their own stages. Vast steel cathedrals that could be packed into trucks and rebuilt on the far side of the world. And they didn't rent that spectacle from anyone. They owned it. Then they seized everything attached to it. The sponsorship banners, the t-shirts, the tour programs, the plastic cups. Every single fan streaming through the gates became a customer buying straight from the band, not from a label skimming its share off the top. And the margins were beautiful. A concert t-shirt costs a few dollars to make and sells for the price of a good meal, times tens of thousands of fans, times 100 cities. The merchandise table wasn't a gift shop. It was one of the most profitable counters in the whole operation. And the tour itself became something to rent out. A perfume, a beer, a phone company. Corporations paid millions just to bolt their name onto the biggest show on earth. The band had turned its own audience into prime advertising space, and it charged rent by the stadium. It was the same logic as the merchandise, scaled up to the size of a multinational's marketing budget. They pushed it further and turned the band's name and logo into a license. Stamped on shirts, badges, and posters, leased out for a slice of every sale, the brand threw off money whether or not anyone bought a record. The group was now quietly a fashion label that happened to play guitars. Behind the show marched a small traveling city, hundreds of crew, fleets of trucks, whole stages leapfrogging across continents, so the next stadium was always ready. It looked like a circus. It ran like a logistics company. Then came the deal that rewired the whole industry. A promoter offered to buy an entire world tour as one giant package, guaranteeing the band an enormous sum up front and taking the financial risk onto himself. No more gambling night by night. The band locked in the profit before the first note played. Rivals thought it was insane. It became the template every stadium act copies to this day. The stage had quietly become a factory, and every night in a new city, it printed money. But earning a fortune and keeping a fortune are two completely different problems. A British rock star sitting at the top of the charts faced a tax rate that could climb toward 80, even 90%. In effect, the taxman was the band's biggest and most silent member. Take home 100 and hand most of it straight back. So the banker turned to the second half of the machine. Not how the money came in, where it was allowed to live. The band's name, their logo, their catalog, their touring income, all of it was quietly reorganized into a lattice of holding companies, many of them steered out of the Netherlands. And the Dutch setup had one very attractive feature. It treated income from royalties with an exceptionally light touch. So the band's intellectual property, the true crown jewels one, was moved there, and the world's payments for their music were routed through it. Follow a single dollar. A fan in one country buys a ticket or a song. The payment crosses borders, lands in a holding company abroad, and by the time it settles, only a sliver has been lost to tax along the way. And here's the quiet trick underneath all of it. Money doesn't have to be taxed where you live. It can be taxed where your company lives. So the songs lived in a gentle little country. The band lived somewhere else, and the gap between the two was pure retained profit. The reported outcome was jaw-dropping. Over one long stretch of years, public filings suggested the band paid tax at a rate of only around 1 or 2% on their international earnings. A tiny fraction of what an ordinary nurse or teacher back home paid on a modest salary. And every step of it was legal. That's the genuinely unsettling part. This wasn't a scrappy loophole some rebel stumbled onto in a pub. It was elite, top-shelf financial engineering, the exact machinery that giant multinationals use to protect their profits, pointed at a stack of rock and roll songs. The wild men on stage were quietly running the balance sheet of a private bank. And here's why the whole design held together so beautifully. The assets they had fought so hard to control almost never lose their value. A steel mill rusts. A gadget is obsolete inside a year. But a song that people have loved for 50 years? Every time it lands in a movie, a stadium, a commercial, a video game, it pays out again. And it costs almost nothing to press the next copy. This is the thing financiers call asset light. You own the one thing everybody wants, you spend almost nothing to reproduce it, and the money quietly compounds on itself year after year. Add it all up over the decades, and their tours alone have grossed billions of dollars, putting a rock band on the same financial scale as the record labels that once owned their songs. And the market eventually put a number on it. In recent years, the catalogs of aging rock stars have sold for hundreds of millions of dollars each because a beloved, proven song is one of the steadiest income streams on Earth. A hit from 1969 now pays out like a bond that never matures. Slowly, the band stopped being a group of musicians who happened to earn money. They became a brand that happened to make music, a durable, cash-generating machine that could be passed down, reinvested, and grown across whole generations. This is why the structure was built to outlive its founders. Ownership sits in trusts and companies, not in one person's bank account. So the machine keeps running even as the people who started it grow old. The chaos was always just the show. The discipline was the business, and the business in the end was the real masterpiece, worth far more than any single song they ever recorded, which hands you a strange and genuinely useful idea. We're trained to spot great businesses by their products. The gadget, the app, the shiny thing in your hand. But this band's story points somewhere much quieter. Their real edge was never only the music. It was owning the rails the music rode on and then structuring what they kept so that almost nothing ever leaked out. So the real lesson was never to start a band. It's that the people who quietly get rich are rarely the ones making the most noise. They're the ones who decide who gets paid. Control your own distribution. Defend your margins. Own something that refuses to decay. That combination is the hidden pattern behind nearly every fortune that outlives a trend. Most of the crowd never notices. They're watching the noise up on stage, and they miss the fortress being built, brick by silent brick behind it. Teach yourself to see the fortress, and you start to spot the next one long before the crowd does, while everyone else is still just listening to the music. This video is sponsored by Motescope. Everything the stones just showed us, widening moats, compounding, at a quality at a fair price, is simple in theory. Actually finding those companies, that's the hard part. That's exactly what MoatScope is built for. It rates thousands of stocks on the two things that matter most: how strong the moat is and how much you'd pay for it. Quality times valuation on one simple scorecard, so you can spot the widening moats that are actually trading at a fair price. Check out MoatScope at the link below and go find your next compounder.